She left me for a rich man. Now I own his business and he works for me. And when I was 14, the only thing I knew for sure was that I hated waiting on life to change. My mother was breaking her back pulling 12-hour shifts at a rehab clinic, coming home with deep creases under her eyes and hands that smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. Our fridge was half full more often than not, and I wore shoes so scuffed they had holes by the time the snow came. My uncle Donnie owned this greasy, beat-up repair shop on the corner of 15th and Hazel in Cleveland. It wasn't glamorous, paint peeling off the walls, tools scattered like debris after a storm, but to me, it looked like salvation. Donnie didn't want me working there at first. Told me flat out that I should be hitting the books, aiming higher, dreaming bigger than socket wrenches and oil pans. But I didn't care about that. I wasn't interested in classrooms or algebra tests that didn't teach me anything about surviving. What I wanted was money in my pocket and a way to keep the lights on without Mom having to sell her soul 1 hour at a time. So I begged him, told him I'd sweep floors and scrub toilets, whatever it took. He finally caved after a week, handed me a busted broom, and said if I got in the way, he'd throw me out himself. I started every afternoon right after school, pushing that broom like my life depended on it. The older guys, real mechanics with thick calloused hands and cigarettes always tucked behind their ears, laughed when they first saw me. Scrawny kid in second-hand jeans trying to look tough with safety goggles too big for his head. But I kept my mouth shut and my ears open. I watched everything, the way they coaxed dead engines back to life, how they diagnosed problems just by listening to the idle. Slowly, they started letting me do small stuff. Organizing tools, topping off fluids, fetching parts. By the time I turned 16, I could do a brake job faster than half the crew. Cars weren't just machines to me. They were puzzles with a heartbeat. I'd spend hours after my shift watching repair videos online, pausing and rewinding until I understood every detail. My notebooks from school were filled with sketches of turbo layouts and engine diagrams instead of history notes. At night, lying on a threadbare mattress in our cold apartment, I'd imagine what my dream garage would look like: glass panels, polished floors, neon lighting, and the world's most beautiful cars lined up like royalty waiting for their throne. Then one afternoon, this guy rolls up in a junked-out '89 Firebird, engine coughing like it had emphysema. Other shops had turned him down, said the rebuild wasn't worth the cost. I asked Donnie if I could take a shot at it. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but he shrugged and said if I wanted to waste my time, go for it. I spent 3 straight weeks working on that car after hours. Reading forums, testing theories, pulling apart the carburetor, and putting it back together twice. When I finally got it to start, it didn't just purr, it growled. The guy drove it off like he'd won the lottery. That was the turning point. After that, people started asking for me by name. By the time I was 18, Donnie paid me under the table more than some of the full-timers. Word got around that I could fix what the dealerships couldn't. I never said no to a challenge. I worked holidays, skipped parties, stayed until sunrise rebuilding engines. I wasn't chasing clout. I was building my future one busted bolt at a time. At 20, I enrolled in a trade program mostly just to make my mom happy, though I already knew more than most instructors. But it's where I met her, Natalie. She came into the training garage one day with this spotless white Audi and a worried look. Her rear axle was clicking, something simple, but she didn't know that. She sat on a plastic chair while I worked on it, asking questions the whole time. Not the usual fake interest some rich girls do to flirt. She genuinely wanted to understand. Asked me how I got into cars, what I loved about engines. She laughed when I told her exhaust notes were like music. Her laugh stayed with me that night like the smell of premium fuel on my hands. We started texting. Then it became late-night phone calls. Then it was lunch in the break room and rides in my rust-red Mustang. She was different, or at least she seemed like she was. Grew up in the suburbs outside the city, where the roads were smooth and houses had more bathrooms than people. Her dad was some hotshot in commercial real estate, always out closing deals, and her mom was one of those PTA presidents who treated yoga like religion. But Natalie wasn't like them, not at first. She liked the smell of grease on my hoodie. Said she liked how my hands were always warm. For a while, it felt real. We dated for 4 years, and I truly thought she believed in me. She'd bring me food at the shop, sit on a stool while I worked late, listening to me talk about my plan to open a custom performance garage. Not just another shop. I wanted a place that built masterpieces, McLarens with tuned turbos, G-Wagons with armored kits, even full EV conversions on classic muscle. I showed her sketches, spreadsheets, even mocked up a logo. She always smiled, said I'd make it big someday. I thought she was in it with me, shoulder to shoulder, building towards something that mattered. But it's easy to say you believe in someone when the sacrifices are invisible. Easy to love the dream when you haven't had to bleed for it. I didn't have the luxury of trial and error. Every mistake meant lost money, lost hours, lost chances. I was working 2 jobs, saving every spare dollar in a battered old cigar box under my bed. I never went out, never traveled, never bought new clothes. Everything I had went into my vision. I thought that mattered to her. I thought it was enough. But I didn't realize then that dreams without pedigree look fragile to people born into comfort. Looking back, the signs were there. Her dad would always call my shop a hustle, never a business. Her mom couldn't remember my name even after 3 years. They'd invite us to dinner and then spend the night talking about their friend's kid getting into Yale or how their niece married a guy who just made senior VP at a hedge fund. I was background noise, something Natalie would grow out of. But I kept showing up, kept grinding, because I thought love was supposed to survive pressure. I never saw the storm coming. I thought I had time. Time to prove myself, time to build enough. But when you're not born with a safety net, time is a debt collector. And when Natalie's family set their sights on someone more fitting for her world, they didn't just pull her away from me. They made her believe she deserved better, that I would never be enough. I didn't know it then, but everything was already shifting. One crack at a time. And soon, everything I'd built, everything I was building toward, was going to burn. The night I walked into the Winston Foundation Gala, I knew I didn't belong. From the second I handed my keys to the valet in that ridiculous gravel driveway lined with Bentleys and Beamers, I felt like my skin didn't fit. I'd spent the whole week working 16-hour days just to finish a twin-turbo upgrade on a customer's GTR so I could free up my Saturday. I'd bought a suit, off the rack, navy blue, too tight in the shoulders, and watched YouTube tutorials for hours just to tie the damn knot around my neck right. It was a small thing, but I was trying, even if everything about that place screamed I didn't belong within a mile of it. The house was obscene, all marble floors and crystal fixtures that probably cost more than my annual rent. Waiters in gloves floated around with trays of food I couldn't pronounce. People talked about investment portfolios, renovations on their summer homes, private chefs, and God knows what else. I spent 10 minutes pretending to enjoy some weird foamy appetizer that tasted like sadness and lemon before Natalie found me near the back wall. She looked incredible. Red dress, hair curled, makeup so perfect it felt unreal. When she saw me, she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I told myself I was just imagining it. Then he arrived, Graham. Graham wasn't just rich. He was the kind of rich that wore confidence like armor. Showed up late on purpose in a snow-white Maserati that purred like it cost blood. Wore a suit tailored to a body sculpted in a private gym, hair like a shampoo commercial, teeth too perfect to be real. And somehow, he knew everyone already. Natalie's parents lit up the moment they saw him. Her dad nearly ran across the ballroom just to shake his hand. I stood there holding a sweating glass of overpriced bourbon while they introduced him like some celebrity, laughing too hard at his dumb jokes about electric Porsches and how working from your yacht was the future of productivity. They seated us for dinner, and somehow I got stuck 2 chairs away from Natalie. She ended up beside Graham. Her dad made sure of it, probably thought I wouldn't notice. And I sat there, cutting into whatever overpriced micromeal they served, listening to Graham talk about expansion strategy and disrupting the luxury sector. I wanted to roll my eyes every time he said vertical integration, but I clenched my jaw instead. Natalie wasn't laughing the way she used to. She was quieter than normal, nodding a lot, smiling politely, barely even looking my way. At one point, Graham cracked a joke about old American muscle cars being relics for beer-swilling rednecks, and no one said anything. Not even Natalie. After dinner came the dancing, which I tried to sit out. I'm not built for smooth waltzes under chandeliers. But Natalie pulled me up, said I needed to at least try. We got one dance in before Graham cut in with that smug look like he was doing me a favor. I thought she'd say no. I thought she'd laugh and pull me back, but she didn't. She didn't even hesitate. The way they moved together was practiced, comfortable, and suddenly I was the one standing alone under golden lights, watching the girl I'd planned to marry laugh in someone else's arms like I was the stranger. Her mom snapped a picture of them dancing, looked at me, and then turned away like I was the help. The drive back was quiet. Natalie stared out the window like the streets of downtown Cleveland had answers she couldn't say out loud. I tried to lighten the mood, made a joke about Graham being a robot programmed by Wall Street and Dad's approval. But she didn't laugh. She said maybe Graham had a point, that knowing the business side of the industry was just as important as knowing the technical stuff, that maybe I needed to think bigger if I wanted to compete. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, but I didn't say what I was really thinking, that she'd just spent the evening falling for a future she thought I couldn't give her. The next few weeks blurred together like bad dreams. Natalie started canceling plans, claiming she had networking events or some charity board her mom roped her into. Graham's name kept coming up, always casually, always followed by, "It's just business." I tried to believe her, tried to pretend the late replies and distant looks weren't what they clearly were. Then I found out she'd been meeting with Graham over lunch to talk investments for my shop idea. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't helping me. She was replacing me. On a random Tuesday afternoon, right after finishing a precision tuning job on a Jaguar F-Type, I got her message. "Can we talk after work?" I should have known what was coming. Hell, everyone knows what that message means. She showed up at my apartment dressed like she was headed to a fashion shoot. Her nails manicured, lips lined perfectly, not a single piece of lint on her designer coat. Meanwhile, I still had grease under my fingernails and a piece of gasket tape in my pocket. She said we needed a break, that she'd been thinking about her future, that her family had opened her eyes to what real stability looked like. I didn't even have the energy to interrupt her rehearsed monologue. Then she said it. Graham helped me realize what I really want in life. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at the woman I thought I was going to build a life with and realized she never really planned to build anything at all. She rolled her eyes when I asked about our plans, about the business we talked about building together. Said I was being unrealistic, that competing with established luxury shops would take capital and connections I'd never have. I laughed, bitter and broken, and told her that if she was taking advice from a man who'd never changed a tire, she was already lost. That's when I told her to leave. Get out. Take her designer opinions and her Graham and walk out the same door she walked in through. She didn't argue, just left. 2 days later, her Instagram was filled with photos of her and Graham on a rooftop bar, looking like a high-end ad campaign for betrayal. The caption read, "Sometimes life takes you exactly where you're meant to be." I nearly threw my phone across the room. Then came the fallout. The Mercedes I worked on the day she dumped me? The client called back complaining about a weird noise in the transmission. Turned out I'd missed something in my haze. I had to cover the repair cost out of pocket. That fat check I was going to put toward my dream shop vanished overnight. After that, it all started slipping. I drank too much, slept too little, and made more mistakes on jobs. Donnie noticed. The customers noticed. The bookings dried up. I burned through my savings faster than I thought possible, trying to drink away the ghost of her in my apartment. Eventually, I lost my place. 2 months behind on rent, I came home to find my lock changed and my tools boxed up. I didn't even fight it. Just loaded what I could into my Mustang and drove to my mom's place. She didn't ask questions. Just hugged me, told me there was a hot meal on the table. But later that night, I caught her crying in the kitchen. I'd never felt like more of a failure. I started picking up whatever jobs I could automax in the mornings, pizza delivery at night. I worked till my hands bled and my soul was numb. But it still wasn't enough. The worst of it? I had to start valet parking cars at this high-end steakhouse downtown, the kind of place I used to dream of taking Natalie when I finally made it. Then one night, the worst punch to the gut I'd ever felt. That same shark gray Maserati pulled up, and out stepped Graham and Natalie, dressed like royalty. She looked right through me like I was a windshield. Graham smirked, handed me $100 bill and said, "Take care of it. I know you've been going through a rough patch." I nodded, took the money, and parked the car. I didn't say a word. But that night, staring at that $100 bill in my hand, I made a decision that would change everything. The night I took that $100 bill home, I didn't sleep a second. I just sat in my old room. Same trophies on the shelf, same crack in the wall, same cheap blinds rattling from the wind outside, and stared at the piece of money like it was some cursed artifact. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt hollow, empty, like every ounce of pride had been wrung out of me and replaced with some imitation of who I used to be. I taped that bill to the wall right above my cracked mirror, not out of sentimentality, but because I needed to see it. Every single day. That wasn't money. That was shame. That was Graham's smirk, Natalie's silence, and the taste of failure I couldn't wash away with all the whiskey in the world. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, grabbed my mom's old digital scale from under the bathroom sink, and finally faced the truth. I weighed 246 pounds. I'd put on nearly 50 pounds since the shop started falling apart. My eyes were sunken, my skin was dull, my beard untrimmed, and I looked like a stranger had crawled inside my bones and made himself comfortable. That was the first moment I actually admitted how far I'd fallen. Not just financially or emotionally, but spiritually. I deleted every app that made me feel worse about myself, unfollowed Natalie and Graham, removed every distraction. Then I laced up my old cleats from high school and ran. I lasted 6 minutes before I thought I was going to die on that sidewalk. Chest burning, knees aching, sweat pouring like someone turned on a faucet. But I didn't stop because I had already stopped too many times. Every missed alarm, every skipped workout, every night I let a drink replace discipline that was behind me now. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't about proving Natalie wrong or humiliating Graham. This was about saving whatever scraps of myself still existed under all that regret and rust. I built a plan, not a pipe dream. A real, brutal, bleeding plan. Up by 4:30. Protein shake. Cardio. Gym. Automax shift at 7. Valet from 4 to 10. Study marketing and business until midnight. Repeat until something changed. The first month was pure hell. My muscles ached constantly, my knees screamed, my stomach grumbled, and my pride sat there in the corner watching me struggle like it enjoyed the show. But slowly, cracks formed in that concrete wall of despair. I dropped 15 pounds. Then 20. My uniform at Automax started fitting better. Customers at the counter began noticing the change. "You're looking sharper these days," one guy said, tossing me a nod of respect that hit deeper than I expected. I started smiling more. Started carrying myself with the quiet weight of a man on a mission. And most importantly, I started listening. Working at Automax gave me an unexpected advantage I hadn't seen coming. I talked to every type of car guy in the city, young kids fixing up Civics, dads rebuilding Corvettes, old men trying to keep their Cadillacs running through the winter. But what really caught my attention were the luxury car owners. The ones who drove in with AMG badges, Bentleys, Astons, and never smiled. These guys weren't car lovers. They were frustrated investors. Always complaining. Always venting about how the dealerships overcharged them, how the service sucked, how nobody cared about the cars anymore. I took notes, actual handwritten ones. Every time a customer vented, I wrote it down. And slowly, a picture started forming. There was a gap in the market. A canyon-sized hole. Rich guys who loved their machines but hated being treated like walking wallets. They didn't want valet service and espresso machines in the lobby. They wanted quality, precision, honesty, and none of the dealers could give them that. I knew those systems. I used to fix their messes. Meanwhile, the warehouse on Rockford Avenue had been sitting abandoned since the pandemic hit. Giant place, steel bones, loading docks big enough for a dozen trucks, and high ceilings you could hang a fighter jet from. It was perfect. It was sitting there, forgotten, exactly like I'd been. I visited that warehouse every single night after my valet shift. Sat in my car in the dark parking lot, sketching floor plans, researching zoning codes, calculating renovation costs on napkins and old receipts. The asking price was insane, $390,000. I didn't have 300, but I didn't stop dreaming. I just shifted into planning mode. Then one night, this beat-up Rolls-Royce pulls into the steakhouse where I'm parking cars. It was making a weird suspension noise, classic air system problem that most techs overlook. I hear it instantly. The owner steps out, older guy, wearing a coat that probably cost more than my car, and looks pissed off. I ask him if he's been to a dealership. He tells me he's gone to 3. No one can fix it. I tell him I know what the issue is. He raises an eyebrow and says, "Then prove it." After my shift, I pop the trunk, grab a few tools, and fix the damn thing in under 2 hours in the lot under a street lamp. When I hand him the keys, he just stares at me like I handed him a gold bar. "You're wasted parking cars," he says. I laugh and say, "Tell me something I don't know." The next day, I get a call. He wants to meet. Turns out his name is Roy. He's old school Detroit business, real estate, steel, shipping, one of those guys who knows the city's guts. He makes me an offer. He'll help me get the warehouse, front $200,000 in startup capital, and connect me with the banks. But I've got 3 months to prove I can run a business. I need to submit a full business plan, show community interest, and secure real clients. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. I took every free course I could find: business strategy, customer psychology, pricing theory. I studied while parking cars. I ran surveys while working Automax, asking customers what they wanted from a real luxury garage. I reached out to every client I'd ever helped, begged for testimonials, bartered for referrals. I lost another 30 pounds. Bought a real suit, not fancy, but tailored. Learned how to speak like a businessman without losing my edge. By the end of the 90 days, I had 5 wealthy clients signed up for long-term service agreements. I had floor plans, renovation quotes, marketing materials, and a business plan I rewrote 12 times. I walked into Roy's office and dropped the folder on his desk without shaking. He read the whole thing in silence. Then he stood, opened a drawer, and tossed me a set of keys. "It's yours," he said. "I bought the warehouse 2 weeks ago. I just needed to see if you had the fight to earn it." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in my car outside the warehouse that night, keys in one hand, $100 bill in the other, and promised myself one thing: this time, no one takes it from me. Not Graham, not Natalie, not even fate. I taped the bill next to the building permit on my wall. The fuel for the fire was already lit. Now it was time to burn. The first day I stepped into that warehouse with the keys in my pocket, I knew I wasn't walking into a building. I was stepping into the skeleton of a dream I'd been carrying since the day I first pulled a socket wrench from Donnie's toolbox. The place was a wreck, no sugarcoating it. Half the windows were shattered, graffiti covered every wall, the roof leaked in so many spots I needed a tarp map just to keep track. Pigeons flapped around like they paid rent, and 3 homeless guys were camped in what would eventually become my future client lounge. But I didn't feel discouraged, I felt home. Finally, I didn't waste a second. I cleared the place out with my own hands. Broke down old shelving units, ripped up warped floor tiles, and filled 3 dumpsters in 5 days. Roy thought I was nuts for doing the demo myself. Told me I should hire a crew. But I needed to feel it, needed to earn every inch. There was something therapeutic about breaking down walls and smashing through rot. It felt like I was taking apart all the bad parts of my past, the lies, the mistakes, the failures, and making space for something clean. I slept on a cot in the back office, ate protein bars and gas station sandwiches, and washed up in a rusted utility sink. My mom tried to bring me meals, always worried I was working myself into the grave. But she didn't understand. This wasn't suffering. This was revival. This was atonement. I poured myself into that renovation like a man possessed. Every bolt that got tightened, every panel that got painted, every crack that got sealed, it all meant something. The floor alone took nearly 50 grand to epoxy correctly, but I didn't cut corners. I refused. If I was going to rebuild my name, my life, my future, it had to be bulletproof. The lifts were next, 2 top-tier hydraulic systems capable of handling everything from Bugattis to heavy-duty S-classes. I paid extra for reinforced steel frames and dual safeties because I'd rather go broke than risk lives. I sourced all the lighting myself. Found a local contractor who used to be a client back when I worked at Donnie's place, and bartered service for labor. Word started spreading. First a whisper, then a buzz. Wyatt's building something crazy out in the industrial strip. Guys I hadn't heard from in years showed up offering help, tools, support. I trained my first 2 mechanics personally, both from the old shop, both hungry like I was. Opening day wasn't flashy. No balloons, no mayor cutting ribbons, no press release. I opened the bay doors at 7 a.m. sharp on a rainy Tuesday and waited. By 7:12, a pearl white Bentley Continental rolled up with a suspension issue. Client had been quoted 12 grand by a dealership. I fixed it for 3. Word got out faster than oil on a shop rack. Calls came in nonstop. 3 Ferraris, 2 Lumbos, and a vintage Aston rolled through by the end of the first week. People started talking. He's not like the others, they said. He actually cares about the cars. That mattered more than any money. Respect was the currency I chased. And now, finally, it was flowing. 3 months in, we were fully booked 2 weeks out. By month 5, it was 6 weeks. I had to turn down standard repair work just to focus on exotic and custom. I added 2 more lifts, expanded to the unit next door, and invested in diagnostic systems direct from Maranello and Stuttgart. Then the big one landed. A client brought in a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT, an absolute unicorn. Engine was in shambles. Other shops told him to scrap it or shell out another 70 grand. I took the job for half. Spent 8 days rebuilding that engine with nothing but vintage manuals, white gloves, and absolute focus. When I fired it up, it purred like a ghost from heaven. The owner cried. He sent a write-up to his private collectors group. That newsletter changed everything. Calls started coming from Chicago, Columbus, even Atlanta. People were shipping in their cars just for me to touch them. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. But I didn't care. I was alive. Meanwhile, I started hearing rumors about Morrison Automotive, Graham's family business. Apparently, their service reputation had tanked. Clients were fleeing in droves. Complaints about shoddy repairs, overcharges, and unqualified techs filled every forum and Facebook group I followed. Turns out Graham had cut technician training budgets to funnel more cash into marketing. He thought fancy lounges and espresso machines could replace skill. They couldn't. Then it happened. That same shark gray Porsche I'd once parked in a valet uniform showed up at my shop, but this time, it came in on a flatbed. Their dealership couldn't figure out the issue. Sent it to me like they didn't remember who I was. A junior employee handed me the keys and said the owner wanted the best. I almost laughed. I did a full inspection, documented every corner, then wrote a quote, $17, $8.50 for everything. When I handed the estimate back, I heard the phone call happen right in front of me. The guy on the other end was Graham. He lost it, called the price outrageous. Said his guys told him it just needed a tune-up. The porter didn't flinch. Just said, "Sir, this is the shop everyone's talking about. You told me to take it to the best." An hour later, Graham pulled into the lot himself. I knew it was him the second that Porsche turned the corner. I stood at the front desk wearing my shop-branded tailored jacket, beard clean, hair slicked, shoulders broader than he remembered. He didn't recognize me at first. Not until he looked around and saw the Ferrari banners, the service wall, the waiting list posted right behind me. Then it hit him. His face twisted through every emotion, shock, denial, then something that looked like fear. "Wyatt," he finally said. I nodded once. "Hard work," I said. "You can't buy that with Daddy's credit." He tried to play nice. Talked about partnering, merging, collaborating. Said his service departments were stretched and that we could help each other. I told him I didn't collaborate with people who treated ambition like a punchline. That his car would be ready in 10 days, and he could pay half up front like everyone else. He didn't argue. He paid. He left. And that's when I knew I'd already won. 2 weeks later, Roy called me into his office. Morrison Automotive was bleeding. The banks were pulling lines of credit. Roy, who happened to sit on the board of one of those banks, told me Graham's expansion was frozen and his assets were under review. "Karma," he said with a smirk. "Moves slow. But it moves." The best part? I didn't even have to lift a finger. I just kept showing up every day, doing the work, grinding while they coasted. And then came the last twist. On a gray Thursday afternoon, Natalie walked through the glass door into my lobby. She looked different. Tired. Dressed in retail instead of designer. No sparkle, no gloss, no cameras. Said she'd made a mistake. Said she should have stayed when I was still fighting to build something real. Said she missed the version of herself that believed in me. I let her talk for a while. I didn't say much. Just watched her unravel all her regrets like thread from a sweater. Then Riley walked in, my girlfriend of nearly 2 years, former track car driver turned performance parts designer. She kissed me on the cheek, said, "You ready for dinner, babe?" and smiled at Natalie like she already knew the whole story. Natalie stood there frozen like she just realized she was too late for everything. And maybe she was. Because I wasn't the same man she left behind in a one-bedroom apartment above a grease pit. I was the man who rose from nothing and built an empire out of the ashes. I looked at her one last time and said, "You didn't lose me when you left. You lost me the second you decided I'd never be enough." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The silence said it all. 6 months after Natalie walked into my lobby and walked right back out, I stood alone inside the same warehouse I once cleaned with my bare hands, now transformed into the flagship of a growing empire. The smell of polished steel and rubber still lingered in the air even after closing, and the humming lights above cast sharp lines across the epoxy floor where a crimson McLaren P1 rested quietly like a sleeping predator. We had just signed a deal to open 2 more locations, one in Indianapolis, the other in Pittsburgh, both fully backed, fully staffed, and already booked months in advance with waiting lists that looked more like concert tours than car repair schedules. I was no longer just a mechanic. I was a name, a brand, a story people wanted to be part of. Emma and I were getting married next spring. Ceremony right here in the original warehouse, surrounded by chrome and horsepower, with our families and folding chairs and a food truck outside slinging barbecue. Nothing flashy, nothing fake, just honest love built from the same grit and fire that rebuilt my life. She didn't care about champagne or 10-piece string quartets. She wanted engine noise, the smell of leather and oil, and to marry a man who had survived everything he wasn't supposed to. She saw me in my worst and stood beside me when I was crawling out of hell one skinned knuckle at a time. I kept that $100 bill Graham gave me, the one he tossed my way like a crumb to a starving stray. It's still framed in my office, right next to the Entrepreneur of the Year award from last fall. People ask why I framed it. Some assume it's because I wanted a reminder of how far I've come. But it's not that simple. That bill isn't just a symbol of disrespect. It's the exact moment the fire lit behind my eyes. The moment I decided no one was ever going to see me as a pity project again. I owe that piece of paper everything, not because it gave me hope, but because it showed me exactly how far I needed to go to reclaim my worth. Graham's family had to sell 4 of their dealerships. The flagship location in New Albany was quietly bought by a shell company Roy arranged. One of my new branches will be built right there, where Graham once stood like a king. Now, he's managing used car sales at a struggling mid-tier lot somewhere in Dayton. I heard he still tells stories about the glory days, back when he almost launched a national luxury brand. Natalie's still with him, though sources close to their circle say it's not by choice. Money dried up. Comfort vanished. And she's clinging to what little remains because starting over would mean admitting she backed the wrong man twice. Her social media changed, too. Gone are the yacht selfies, gala dresses, and champagne brunches. Now it's grainy pictures of homemade meals and recycled quotes about gratitude and resilience. Focusing on what matters, she wrote recently under a photo of a sunset taken from what looked like a modest backyard. I don't hate her. I don't think about her much. When I do, it's more like remembering a movie I used to love before realizing the ending sucked. There's no anger left, only perspective. She wasn't built to walk beside someone climbing a mountain with nothing but bare hands. And that's fine, because I found someone who was. Success didn't feel like revenge. Not really. It felt like peace. Like knowing I could finally stop proving people wrong and start proving myself right. I walk through my shop every morning before the first car arrives, running my fingers along the steel lifts, nodding to my crew, tightening a bolt here, pointing out a misaligned panel there. I'm not above the work. I still breathe it. Still love the way a V12 roars when you get the timing just right. Still lose sleep thinking about gear ratios and aerodynamics. But now I go home to a woman who believes in me, eat dinner without counting coins, and sleep without the ghosts of failure clawing at my throat. The truth is, none of this would have happened if I hadn't lost everything. If Natalie had stayed, if the shop hadn't fallen apart, if I hadn't hit rock bottom in a valet uniform with motor oil under my nails and a smirk burning in my memory, I might still be small, still be safe, still be unknown. Rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the reset button, the place where I stripped everything down to the frame and started rebuilding, piece by piece, stronger than I ever thought possible. Not just the shop, not just my name, me. So now, when people ask how I did it, how I went from broke and broken to building something real, I tell them the same thing every time. You don't need connections. You don't need luck. You don't need people to believe in your dream before you've even poured the foundation. What you need is to burn so badly that failure becomes unacceptable, to want it so hard that you'll eat dirt for dinner if it means getting a step closer. You need to be the kind of person who sees a $100 bill not as a blessing, but as fuel for a furnace no one else can understand. That's what built this. Not revenge, not rage, just relentless, undeniable, earned as hell grit.